It was supposed to be a day like any other in the span of history. People were waking up, moving through their routines, a seemingly normal day in the vast sweep of time. Humanity had become proficient at managing its place in the cosmos, balancing between the threat of its own hubris and the allure of the unknown. The stars that had once been mysterious points of light in the sky were now mapped, catalogued, and dissected into manageable parcels of space. But something changed. The moment would be forgotten by most. A flare of light, a spike in the background radiation of the galaxy, a minor disturbance that would hardly make the news. Yet, for those who understood the science of cosmic ripples, it would signal the beginning of an inevitable shift, the day humanity would become the galaxy's biggest problem. The year was 2467, and Earth was no longer the focal point of human civilization. Humanity had spread out across the stars, settling on dozens of planets and moons within the Milky Way. Vast colonies were sprawled across planets that had been terraformed into lush, vibrant worlds, and even space stations high above ancient nebulae became bustling hubs of commerce, exploration, and politics. The United Terran Federation, or UTF, governed most of humanity's interests, acting as a central authority, but local governments had grown in power and influence. They managed the daily operations of distant colonies, all of which were tied by the seamless web of faster-than-light, FTL, travel that had allowed humanity to spread its reach so far. But not all was well behind the scenes. The Federation was a gargantuan bureaucracy that had become inefficient, corrupt, and complacent with its dominance in the galaxy. The greed for resources, power, and control had seeped into every corner of its administration. Political scandals ran rampant, and corporate interests outstripped humanitarian efforts. It was a system that could only thrive as long as it didn't overreach its boundaries. And then, humanity did the unthinkable, it overreached. The spark of chaos began when the Federation issued the Call Directive. A seemingly innocuous order to expand humanity's reach further than ever before to venture into the uncharted areas of the galaxy that had been left alone for millennia. There was no way to predict the consequences. No one knew what lay beyond the known edges of the galaxy until they ventured into it. It started with a single, unexplainable signal. A deep space transmission picked up by the Federation's Array 2. The source of the signal was from an area that had never been explored, an empty stretch of space far beyond the colonized sectors, known only as the Dark Frontier. At first, it was dismissed as a natural anomaly, a fleeting cosmic event, or a glitch in the detection systems. But as more signals were recorded, strange patterns began to emerge. It was artificial. There were signs of intelligence in the sequence patterns that mirrored the communication methods of a species. But it didn't take long before the Federation's best minds realized the message was not just one of communication. It was a warning. A warning from something ancient. Something vast. Something that had been waiting. As months passed, the Federation put together an expeditionary fleet, code-named the Horizon Initiative, to track down the source of the signals. On the surface, this seemed like the Federation's usual thirst for knowledge and expansion. But the deeper truth was more ominous. The Federation knew, or suspected, that the signal was a distress call from a civilization much older than humanity, one whose technology and influence dwarfed anything known to the human race. At the heart of the Horizon Initiative was Captain Elena Voss, a seasoned officer with a reputation for success and an intense curiosity about the unknown. She had always considered herself a part of something much greater than the Federation. Her dreams of exploration stretched far beyond the political interests of Earth and its colonies. She joined the Horizon Initiative, in part, because she believed this could be the discovery of a lifetime, one that could reshape the very future of humanity. But when they arrived at the source of the signal, there was no discovery. At least not in the way they expected. A vast, dead world appeared before them, a massive planet once teeming with life, now reduced to a desolate graveyard. Towering structures still stood, long abandoned, their surfaces corroded by time. Evidence of a once thriving civilization lay scattered across the planet's surface, and yet, nothing lived there. No signs of struggle, no warning systems, just a quiet, unnerving emptiness. Then the second message came. It was not a plea for help, but a command, delivered in a language that humanity could barely comprehend. And the meaning was clear: leave now. Do not approach. You are not ready. For the Federation, this was a turning point. It wasn't the first encounter with alien intelligence, but it was the first time humanity had encountered a civilization that not only predated them but actively warned them to stay away. What followed was even more shocking: an automated message, a hidden transmission embedded within the alien data. The message was a set of coordinates. Coordinates that led directly to the galactic core. And when those coordinates were decrypted, they revealed something so staggering, so incredible, that humanity's leaders could not ignore it. The message was a map, a guide to a colossal artifact buried deep within the center of the galaxy. An artifact that, according to the records of the ancient civilization, had the power to reshape the very fabric of reality. A tool that could give its wielder control over time, space, and even the laws of the universe itself. At first, the Federation's leadership thought about the implications. Such power in the hands of humanity could secure their place in the galaxy forever. But there were other factions within the Federation who were more cautious, recognizing the dangers such an artifact posed. Among them was Dr. Arun Keshav, a scientist with the Council of Galactic Defense, who had studied the alien race that had once possessed the artifact. It is not just a tool, Dr. Keshav warned, his voice hoarse over the comms. It is a weapon that has the potential to destroy everything. The civilization that created it vanished for a reason. We are not ready. But the lure of power was too strong. There were already whispers among the Federation's highest-ranked some members who believed that controlling such an artifact would mean total dominance over all other species in the galaxy. The decision was made. The Federation would push forward. As humanity moved closer to the galactic core in search of the artifact, the consequences of their actions became more apparent. Unbeknownst to the Federation, the very act of approaching the coordinates had triggered something deep within the galaxy itself. Across the vast expanse of space, ancient artificial intelligence systems that had lain dormant for millennia began to stir. The old guard of the galaxy, the remnants of civilizations far more advanced than humanity, took notice. They had been watching, waiting, and they were not pleased with the rise of a new, unchecked species. Humanity's reckless ambition had stirred an ancient wrath that had been slumbering beneath the stars. The first sign of the galaxy's response came in the form of a fleet of ships, massive, monolithic vessels that emerged from the heart of the galaxy. They were unlike anything humanity had ever seen, their forms so alien and incomprehensible that they seemed to defy the very laws of physics. These ships, however, did not come with the intention of negotiating, nor did they seek to communicate. They came with only one objective: to destroy. At the same time, reports of disturbances started to flood in from the outer colonies. Mysterious attacks. Entire planets wiped from existence without a trace. Cities on distant moons disintegrated into nothingness, their populations vanishing in an instant. The Federation had underestimated the true nature of the artifact they were seeking. It was not merely a relic of an ancient civilization, it was a beacon, a signal to a long-forgotten threat. And humanity had ignited the spark that would lead to their own downfall. In the halls of the Federation, panic set in. Leaders scrambled to maintain control as reports of the invasion poured in. But the galaxy was now shifting into a new phase in which humanity's future was no longer guaranteed. The Federation, now a fragile entity on the brink of collapse, called upon all its resources. A desperate plea went out to every colony, every space station, and every ship that could fight. The Terran military, once a force of peacekeeping, was now mobilizing for total war. But it was too late. The advanced alien fleets began to descend on the core worlds, tearing apart the very heart of human civilization. The remnants of humanity's colonies, now fractured and divided, found themselves under siege from forces too powerful to resist. As the first wave of destruction swept through the Federation, Captain Elena Voss, who had once been a beacon of hope, now found herself at the helm of the last remaining fleet, fighting not just for the survival of humanity, but for its very place in the galaxy. Part 9. The Searing Silence. Captain Elena Voss stared at the viewscreen of the Aegis, the flagship of the last fleet standing between humanity and complete annihilation. The once proud ships of the Terran military were now a shadow of their former selves, crippled by a series of ambushes from the alien invaders. Her ship, and the few remaining warships under her command, were all that remained of the Federation's military might. The outer colonies had been lost. The core systems were crumbling. The ancient fleet from the Galactic core was relentless, sweeping across every planet like a tide that could not be stemmed. Captain, we've lost contact with the fleet at Aldebaran. The flagship's last transmission, Lieutenant Nia Zane's voice faltered. Her fingers hovered over the controls, but there was nothing left to do. The Aegis had already taken a critical hit, and its communication systems were severely damaged. Elena clenched her fists at her sides. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her chest, but she couldn't let it show. Signal all remaining ships. We'll hold the line at the Hypatia Rift. It's the last natural defense point before the core systems fall. We can't let them get any closer. As she gave the orders, she glanced over her shoulder at the communications officer, Commander Rylan Hart. He was older than the rest of the crew, his face worn with the years of service, but the fire still burned in his eyes. The rift, it's not a defense point, Captain, Rylan muttered, staring grimly at the tactical map. It's a choke point. Once we're there, they'll have us cornered. Elena knew it as well as he did. The Hypatia Rift, a massive, unstable sector of space full of swirling black holes, ion storms, and gravitational anomalies, had always been a natural defense barrier. For centuries, it had protected humanity's central colonies from alien invaders. Now, it was the last obstacle between the invaders and what was left of human civilization. The problem was, the rift wasn't exactly a place to hide. It was a trap. But there were no other options. We make them pay for every inch, Rylan. It's all we can do now, she said, her voice resolute. The weight of the galaxy's fate seemed to rest on her shoulders, but Elena would not break. Not now. As the Aegis moved toward the rift, the sheer scale of the alien fleet became more apparent. The enemy ships were colossal, their forms incomprehensible, like twisted sculptures of metal and energy. They didn't look like anything that should exist. They defied all logic, impossibly vast, shifting in shape, almost alive in their movement. It wasn't just their size that was terrifying, it was the palpable sense of their alien intelligence. They seemed to be aware of everything, predicting every move the Federation made with eerie precision. These things, they're not just machines, are they? Lieutenant Zane whispered, more to herself than anyone else. They're a part of something greater, Elena replied, her eyes scanning the horizon of the rift. They're not here to conquer. They're here to cleanse. The thought hung in the air like a dark cloud. The Federation had tried to contact the alien invaders, to negotiate, to understand their motives. But the response was always the same, silence, followed by an overwhelming show of force. The message, if it could even be called that, was clear. Humanity was an infestation. For the first time since the crisis began, Elena felt doubt creeping into her mind. The Federation had long prided itself on being the dominant force in the galaxy. But it seemed that for all their power, humanity was no match for the forces that had lurked in the darkness for eons. What's the status on the artifact? Elena asked, turning to Rylan. The coordinates they had received from the alien message had led them to the heart of the rift near a dead star where, according to the data, the artifact might still be hidden. Still scanning, Captain, he said. But it doesn't make sense. The readings, it's like the entire area is being shielded by something. Elena exhaled sharply. The artifact could be the key to humanity's survival, or its complete destruction. The alien civilization that had once created it had vanished, but not before they had embedded a warning in the stars. Leave now. Do not approach. But here they were, approaching anyway. As they neared the Hypatia Rift, the Aegis received a transmission, a broadcast from the alien fleet. This time, it wasn't a simple warning. It was a declaration. Humanity has been observed, a voice crackled through the comms, its tone cold and mechanical. You are a plague, a virus that has spread across the stars. Your civilization is a temporary aberration. You will be erased. The galaxy will be cleansed. Elena felt a shiver run down her spine as the voice echoed through the ship. This was not a negotiation. This was an execution. But there was still a chance. A faint hope, glimmering in the darkness. The artifact, Elena muttered under her breath. If it's here, it could give us a fighting chance. Ryland's eyes widened. Captain, do you mean? It's the only hope we have left. We need to find it. Now. As if on cue, the ship's sensors began to ping with unusual readings. The anomaly was stronger now, some kind of energy field that seemed to block their scans. It was close. The artifact was close. Approaching the dead star, Ryland said, his voice grim. We're about to enter the gravitational pull. The rift's instability is increasing. Elena, Commander Hart interjected. We don't have much time. The enemy is closing in. I know, Elena replied, her eyes narrowing as she stared at the star ahead. But we have to make it. We're not just fighting for humanity anymore. We're fighting for the future of this galaxy. The fleet moved deeper into the rift, passing through swirling bands of ion storms and gravitational eddies. The black holes that dotted the region grew larger, their immense gravitational fields distorting space around them. Each second felt like an eternity as the Aegis fought to keep its course steady. Finally, they reached the coordinates, the dead star. It was blackened, burned out, and surrounded by a swirling mass of dark energy. But there, orbiting the dead star, was something that shouldn't exist. An enormous structure, seemingly built of some kind of energy field. It pulsed with unnatural power. There it is, Elena whispered. The artifact. But as they moved closer, the alien fleet emerged from the shadows, blocking their path. The ships were enormous now, surrounding the Aegis in a ring of impossibility. Elena's heart raced. The battle was imminent, and their time was running out. But in that moment, something unexpected happened. The artifact began to respond. A sudden surge of energy erupted from the structure, sending shockwaves through the rift. The space around them began to warp, and the alien ships hesitated. The strange, incomprehensible vessels recoiled, as if repelled by an unseen force. Then, with a deafening roar, the artifact activated. The energy wave cascaded outwards, sweeping across the alien fleet and bending reality itself. For a moment, everything froze. Time slowed. The fabric of space seemed to warp and ripple like water disturbed by a stone. And in that moment, Elena understood. The artifact wasn't just a tool. It was a weapon capable of controlling the very fabric of the universe. The ancients who had created it hadn't just used it to reshape worlds, they had used it to maintain control over the galactic order. To prevent any species, no matter how advanced, from threatening the balance. And now, humanity had triggered it. The alien fleet began to disintegrate before their eyes. Ships that had been indestructible moments ago now twisted and collapsed into themselves. The sheer force of the artifact's energy ripped apart their molecular structures. The invaders' ships were torn asunder, their forms dissolving into nothingness. But the price was steep. The artifact was not a tool for peaceful coexistence. It was a harbinger of destruction. Elena could feel the power coursing through the Aegis, as if the ship itself was being consumed by the artifact's energy. The stars around them flickered, and the black holes began to twist and expand, threatening to collapse the entire sector. The question that loomed large in Elena's mind was simple, yet profound: had humanity just saved itself or doomed the entire galaxy? The surge of energy from the artifact intensified, sending tremors through the Aegis. Elena's hands gripped the edge of the console as the ship groaned under the immense pressure. The artifact's power was not simply destructive, it was alive, a force beyond comprehension. For a brief moment, Elena felt as though the ship and everything within it was being absorbed into the very fabric of reality itself. "Captain!" Rylan shouted over the growing cacophony of alarms. "We need to pull back, or we'll be caught in the gravitational collapse. The rift structure is destabilizing. This entire region is about to implode." The alien fleet was all but gone now, shattered by the sheer destructive force of the artifact. But the aftermath was worse than they could have imagined. The black holes, once distant dangers, now threatened to swallow everything within the rift. The very fabric of space and time was fraying at the edges. A storm of cosmic forces, gravity, radiation, and dark energy began to spiral into the heart of the rift, consuming everything in its path. "We can't pull back," Elena muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Her gaze was fixed on the view screen, where the alien ships had once been. Now, there was nothing but a swirling mass of collapsing space, like a wound in the universe itself. "We're too close. We're caught in it." "Captain, the artifact," Zane said, voice trembling. "It's not stopping. It's still." Elena turned, her eyes wide as she saw it, the artifact, floating in the center of the dead star, glowing with a harsh, otherworldly light. It wasn't just a weapon anymore. It was a force, an ancient device that was erasing the boundary between reality and chaos. The gravitational anomalies around them were growing stronger, the ship's hulls creaking as they struggled to maintain integrity. If they didn't act fast, the Aegis would be torn apart. "Rylan!" Elena snapped, her eyes fixed on the star. "We need to shut it down. Find a way to disable it. Now!" Ryland's face was pale as he worked frantically at his console, his fingers moving with practiced speed, though it was clear that he was operating on pure instinct. "Captain, I don't know if we can. The energy fields around the artifact are unlike anything we've ever encountered. They're not just shielding it, they're linked directly to the fabric of spacetime." "We don't have a choice," Elena said, her voice sharp with authority. "We can't allow this to keep going. If we let it, we'll lose everything." As Ryland continued to work, Elena turned to Lieutenant Zane. "Get to the escape pods. Tell the crew to prepare for evacuation if we can't stop this." Zane looked at her in disbelief. "Captain, we can't abandon ship. Not after." "I said now," Elena interrupted, her tone unwavering. "We've lost the Federation. We've lost the colonies. We've lost everything but each other. If this is the end, we need to make sure humanity survives. We need to make sure someone survives." Zane nodded grimly, her face pale, and quickly relayed the order. Elena turned her attention back to the view screen. The artifact was still pulsing, its light growing brighter, more intense. She could feel the ship's structure beginning to shake more violently. The distortion in space was no longer just a phenomenon they could observe, it was affecting them directly, pulling at them, trying to tear them into the void. "Rylan," Elena said through gritted teeth, "how much longer?" "I don't know," he shouted, slamming his fist onto the console. "I'm trying every override. The systems are fighting me. It's like the artifact has taken control." Elena felt a surge of anger, followed by the crushing realization that the artifact was too powerful for them to control. Humanity had triggered something beyond their ability to handle. She had known the risks, she had known the stakes. But this was something else entirely. Then, as if mocking their helplessness, the artifact responded. A violent pulse of energy surged through the rift, and a tear opened in space itself. A massive vortex began to form, drawing everything into it. The Aegis groaned under the strain as the distortion grew larger, threatening to engulf the entire ship. "Captain!" Rylan screamed. "We have to go. Now!" But it was too late. The Aegis lurched violently as the vortex grew, its entire hull shaking. The stars outside the windows warped and stretched, the ship being pulled inexorably toward the maw of the collapse. The crew scrambled, trying to secure what little they could, but there was no escape from this force. Elena could hear the whispers of the crew's frantic efforts, the sounds of their disbelief at the calamity unfolding around them. She took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on the vortex. It was a singularity, a tear in space and time, something that should never exist. And yet, here it was. The power of the artifact had not just destabilized the rift, it had created an instability that was tearing apart the very structure of the galaxy. Elena's thoughts raced. If the artifact had the power to tear apart the rift, to create this collapse, then it was possible that it could undo everything: the war, the destruction, the invasion. But that was a gamble, one that could cost them everything. Her mind flashed back to the first time she had heard of the artifact, how the ancient civilization had sealed it away for fear of its power. They had known the consequences. And now, humanity had unleashed it. And yet, Rylan, Elena barked. Can we harness its power? Use it to? No, Captain, he shouted. We can't control it. It's a weapon, not a tool for. I know what it is, Elena snapped. But we don't have a choice. If it's capable of creating this rupture, then it's capable of reversing it. We have to find a way to harness its energy before we're pulled in completely. Ryland's face was pale, his fingers trembling as he continued to try to override the ship's systems. The only way we can do that is by syncing with the artifact's core. But we'd need an interface. A direct connection. And even if we succeed, it's unlikely we'd survive the process. Elena looked at him, her mind racing. There was no time. They were being pulled into the abyss. If the artifact was truly capable of manipulating spacetime, she had to find a way to tap into that power. It was a desperate plan, one that teetered on the edge of madness. But it was the only plan left. We have to try, Elena said, her voice steady, though she felt the weight of everything crashing down on her. Elena stood before the main console, her fingers trembling as she initiated the emergency override for the ship's central control. The Aegis was seconds away from being consumed, but she knew there was one last chance, a desperate gamble. Captain, I don't think Rylan began, but Elena cut him off with a sharp glance. Do it, Rylan. I'm not asking for permission. With a final, trembling breath, Elena reached for the emergency terminal, where the direct interface to the artifact was located. It was a bridge between the ship and the galaxy's most dangerous device, and Elena knew that once she made the connection, there would be no going back. The moment her hand made contact, the energy from the artifact surged into her, flooding her body with overwhelming power. It was like nothing she had ever felt before, a force that seemed to exist outside of time itself. Her thoughts became a blur, her body no longer her own. She could feel the entire fabric of the galaxy shuddering around her, the threads of space and time twisting and tearing. In that moment, she understood. The artifact was not just a weapon. It was a key. A key to the very nature of reality itself. With a final, desperate push, Elena's mind connected to the core of the artifact. The energy coursed through her, and with one final command, she pulled. Everything went black. Part 17, The Echoes of Time. When Elena awoke, it was as if she had never left. Her head ached, her body felt numb, but the ship, the Aegis, was still intact. The raging cosmic storms, the vortex, the overwhelming pull of the singularity, all of it had vanished. She was floating in stillness, suspended in an eerie quiet. She blinked, trying to focus her vision. Her hands trembled as she pushed herself upright from the command chair. The ship's systems, though battered, seemed to be functioning again. The stars outside the view screen were steady, unmoving. What happened? She murmured. Captain? Are you okay? Ryland's voice came through the comms, sounding strained. Elena's fingers hovered over the console, and she slowly brought up the ship's status. The readings were impossible. The rift, the singularity, the black holes, they were gone, as if they had never existed. The artifact's presence was still there, but it had no more power, no more pulse. The energy had dissipated. The galaxy was still. She hesitated, processing the vast, unimaginable changes. It was only then that she noticed the date on the ship's logs. Her breath caught in her throat. It was not the day they had set out. It was not even the years they had left behind. The date read 2137. Over 300 years had passed. Part 18, The New Beginning. Captain Voss, Ryland's voice echoed through the comms, now filled with confusion. The readings they're showing. Everything's different. The system logs we've traveled back. Elena's heart pounded. There was no way the artifact could have simply reversed their position in time, could it? But the evidence was irrefutable. Time had been altered, she had altered it. As the realization sank in, Elena's mind spun. She had pulled on the very threads of spacetime, unraveling the fabric of reality itself. Her desperate act to stop the collapse had reversed the calamity. But at what cost? Had they truly stopped the invasion? Had they really saved the galaxy, or was this just the beginning of something else entirely? We need to assess the situation, Elena said, her voice steady now, though the weight of the truth pressed heavily on her chest. Prepare a status report, Ryland. We need to know what we're dealing with. As Ryland complied, Elena stood, gazing out the viewscreen at the stars. There was a part of her that still didn't fully understand the magnitude of what she had done. She had gambled with the future, hoping for survival, and somehow, against all odds, she had won. But what would the future hold now? It was clear that the galaxy had changed. Time itself had been rewritten, and the balance of power that had once existed in their universe no longer applied. What humanity had done to the galaxy might have stopped the invasion, but it had also shifted the course of history, perhaps irreparably. Would there be consequences? Would the galaxy remember what had happened, or had time erased it all? Would the ancient species, the ones who had hidden the artifact away, return once more? Elena didn't know. But there was no going back now. In the days that followed, the crew of the Aegis worked tirelessly to piece together their new reality. They confirmed that the Federation had not yet risen to its powerful, centralized state. Colonies were still small and isolated. Humanity had not yet ventured to the stars in the same widespread way that had led to the events they just experienced. The call directive, the order that had set the Federation on its disastrous path, was still a future possibility, yet to be enacted. The Aegis and her crew were the only ones who knew what had transpired. The galaxy's future hung in the balance, but the scars of the past were erased. The invasion from the unknown, an event so catastrophic it would have erased entire civilizations, was now a historical anomaly. And yet, the world was not entirely at peace. The artifact still pulsed within the ship's systems. It was no longer a weapon of destruction, but a potential catalyst. It could be used again. The temptation would always be there. Elena knew this. Humanity had faced its worst fear, but now it faced a new test: how to move forward without repeating its past mistakes. Captain, Ryland called, breaking her reverie. He was standing before the ship's tactical display, scanning the data. I've been looking into the artifact's energy signatures. There's something we missed, something in the way it manipulates time. Elena walked over to him, feeling the weight of the moment. What do you mean? It's not just a weapon, Ryland said, his voice low. It's a doorway. A conduit. It doesn't just manipulate reality, it creates it. If we're not careful, we could open doors we don't want to open. The universe as we know it could unravel again. Elena exhaled slowly. This was the final piece of the puzzle. The artifact had not just reversed the timeline, it had created a new one. And it had the power to continue doing so. Time itself, stretched thin, could be twisted. History could be rewritten. They stood at the crossroads of a new existence. The temptation to use the artifact again, to reshape the galaxy, to reshape history, to fix the wrongs, to undo mistakes, to bring back the lost, it would always be there. But Elena knew what the true test was now. Could humanity resist that power? She looked out at the stars, knowing the answer was still uncertain. But there was one thing she was sure of: humanity had a chance to change. Not through rewriting history, not through destructive power, but through learning from the past, through understanding the consequences of its actions. "We'll keep it contained," Elena said, her voice firm. "We'll never use it again. This galaxy has had enough of our mistakes. We need to move forward without shortcuts." Rylan nodded, though his face was uncertain. The crew had been through too much, and the artifact's pull was undeniable. But Elena's conviction rang true. If humanity was ever to evolve, it would have to do so by its own will, not through tampering with the natural course of events. And so, they sealed the artifact, keeping it hidden and locked away in the deepest reaches of the Aegis. The ship's engines hummed quietly in the background, a reminder of the fragile peace they had fought for. The crew continued their journey, unsure of what the future held, but determined to face it without the arrogance of power. The legacy of humanity. Years passed, and the galaxy slowly began to heal. The Federation, when it eventually rose, was built upon new principles. No longer obsessed with domination, humanity learned from its near destruction. Colonies began to connect in peaceful ways. Exploration resumed, but with a new understanding of the responsibility that came with it. The Aegis drifted through the stars, a symbol of the past, carrying the memories of a time when humanity almost destroyed itself. Elena Voss and her crew became legends, whispers of their names spoken across the galaxy, a reminder of the fragility of existence. And, deep in the vaults of the Aegis, the artifact remained silent, dormant, its power sealed. For now, at least.